Eilitioin ve'oreo Kemo yisho betzireo.
The subject which I would like to discuss today is what is it that we're actually supposed to be doing now, from now, so to speak, beginning of the 9 days until Tisha B'Av, and there's a dual purpose. There's a chiyuv that we have to be misabel, and we also have an obligation to try to rectify ourselves to fix the situation that Mashiach should come. And the basic issue, which I believe that this is the issue that's the most difficult, where am I supposed to be improving? This is, I believe, the biggest question. Everybody has places that they need to improve, and many people have multiple places that they need to improve. But how am I supposed to find the key factor that this is going to make the difference, that I am going to improve? I'd just like to share with you a question that I was asked by a parent of a 9-year-old. And the question that this 9-year-old asked was an amazing question. But the answer which I gave to the father who asked me, was not an answer that you can give to a 9-year-old. The child asks, the 9 days are going to come, Tisha B'Av is going to come, and I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. Do you think that's going to bring Mashiach? So then I wasn't successful. That was the question that he asked me. So what does it make a difference what I'm going to do if what I'm going to do is not going to make it happen? And the answer to this question, I think, is a basic yesod in all of our avodas Hashem. We have one job to do. That is our job. Our job has to do with perfecting us as an individual, and also it has a ripple effect that it helps all of Klal Yisrael and everybody else. But the main thing is that we improved. If you improved and you did what was necessary from your part to bring Mashiach, you have accomplished what you were supposed to do. Whether Mashiach will end up coming because of other people or not, that is irrelevant. I believe that's an important nakuda, that we have to understand that we live as an individual and we live as part of a community. And yes, a person can succeed as an individual even if the community fails. And there are some times that the community can succeed even though the individual failed, and pull you along. But your job is to do your best. And you are not judged by other people. The Gemara says about certain people, in his times, he was roi that Mashiach should have come. And that means, and that he gets credit for that. Not here in this world, but he gets credit for that which a person did. If you did your part that brought about that the Churban Bayis should cease to be, then you were successful in your job. And that's an important nakuda. The side of what I would like to discuss is a Gemara which everybody is very familiar with, this Gemara, and I believe that the answer to what we are supposed to be doing lies in between the lines of this Gemara. The Gemara says that when the Churban happened, they asked the Nevi'im, they asked the Talmidei Chacham, and nobody knew the answer until they asked the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Shaloi birchu b'Torah tchila. They didn't make a bracha on the Torah beforehand. Now, what is the question and what is the answer of the Gemara? This is a question which I believe has to be thought about. If the Isser of learning Torah without making a bracha is such a great Isser, so how come they didn't find it? What did they need HaKadosh Baruch Hu to tell them about it for, right? And if it's not such a great Isser, so why is that the reason of the Churban Bayis? Okay, there's a famous pasuk which we say in the Haftarah, Shabbos Chazoin, Yoda Shor Karneu v'Chamor Eves Ba'olav v'Ami Yisrael Ayada Oisi. A shore knows its trough, and the donkey knows its trough, and Ami Yisrael Ayada Osi. And I remember I read once Rabbi Schwab described when he was a little boy him watching the cows come into the barn. And every single cow knew exactly where he was supposed to go. It was like a very orderly service. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a farm. I've been in a farm and I've seen this happen. It's an amazing thing. These dumb animals are pretty smart, right? They can actually figure out where they're supposed to go, and they go there and they do what they're supposed to do. It comes to milking time, and they go where they have to go to get milked, and they're ready to go. V'ami Yisrael hayada oisi. And Klal Yisrael just can't figure it out. Now, that is quite pathetic, right? We're worse than a dumb cow. What is Chazal telling us? So Rav Dessler, on this question, he asks an absolutely fascinating question. The cow is not smart. He has a built-in device that tells him, a homing device, like a homing pigeon. They know where they live and they go back to there. It doesn't take any brains. It's a natural instinct. Whereas for a person to be Oved Hashem, that takes work. So what is the taina of the Navi on us? The Chamor and the Shor, they have a built-in system. V'ami Yisrael hayada osi. And he answers this question with a very simple thought. He says, we do have a built-in system. A person will take away all of his other wants and desires. He will realize that this is what he's supposed to do. We have Averis, and we have our desires, and those cloud up our brain and force us to be not focused on what we want to focus that we want to do. If we would get rid of all of those exterior delights and focus on what we're supposed to do, we would know automatically what we're supposed to do. There are many times that you ask a person, somebody's in a fight. How should they make up? And you can give them a point-by-point plan of how do you make up with somebody in a fight. And then you turn to the person, I know that you're in a fight with so-and-so. Why don't you put that plan into work? And then all of a sudden comes a whole bunch of excuses why my situation is different than that situation, and it's not going to work. I'm sure you all are familiar with this kind of a situation. What that means is that when it's negea to you, you have your own Yetzer Hara, and your Yetzer Hara clouds your brain, and you don't see things that you would see naturally if you were just left to be without your Yetzer Hara. But yes, we do have within us a internal motor that will promote us to do the right thing, and our job is to turn that motor on. That's the first thing that has to be understood. So we do have within us the power to figure out what we have to do. And the second thing, these are two things which happen all the time, the mitzvahs anoshim b'limodoi. Mitzvahs anoshim b'limodoi means that people do everything that they're supposed to do, and they miss the point of what they're supposed to be doing. I said over many years ago, if I'm not mistaken, in the Shabbos Shuva Drosha, the following story. I know the people that were involved. There were two people that were big Talmidei Chachamim that were in a fight. And one waited for the other person to Erev Yom Kippur when he was going to the mikveh. And he met him when he was going into the mikveh, and he asked him mechila. Okay? I thought this was going to be a simple story. What shocked me was the other person says, I don't have time to speak to you now. I have to go to the mikveh. I have to do tshuva. Okay? So it's very funny when it happens to somebody else. But this is what's going on. Now, I'm not here to judge anybody, but I would imagine that if he would have been meichel that person, that would have been worth more than going to the mikveh 1,000 times, right? Because this is where it hurts you, and this is what you have to grow into. To serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to go to the mikveh, is a minor thing. We have, when I say minor, I don't mean that it's minor, but it doesn't cost. Our avodas Hashem, in the area of avodas Hashem, is much easier for us to do than it is to do avodas Hashem that has to do with other people. And this is an important yesod which we have to be aware of. The Bali Musar explain this yisod with the following mashal. You have a person that has a shaila on a chicken. It used to be there was such a thing as a chicken that didn't come from a plastic bag. It actually came from your backyard. And they had a shaila on the chicken. They would take the chicken to the Rav, and the Rav would poke around, and he would say, it's kosher, it's treif, whatever. And if you were not lucky, you got a treif of chicken. And you just chalk it up. That's part of life. You have a treif of chicken. You'd go home and you would absorb the loss. Okay? Your neighbor borrowed your salt and said he's going to give it back tomorrow, and now you want to bake a cake and you don't have any salt, and you go ballistic. How am I supposed to bake a cake? My neighbor the salt costs less than a chicken, right? So the Bali Musar say it's easier to be meichel a chicken than it is to be meichel your neighbor. And why is that so? The reason that that's so is there's nobody standing on the other side of the chicken. It's you and your avodas Hashem. And you're willing to sacrifice your chicken for avodas Hashem. But for me to let somebody else advance in Olam Hazeh so that I should advance in my avodas Hashem, that's very difficult for people to do, because that really costs. It really costs, and everybody has these kind of nisyonis all the time. You know, you'll have an opportunity to go to a shir or to go to some kind of an event and you know somebody else wants it, and you give your ticket away to somebody else. So you hear such a story, that's like an amazing story, right? What's so amazing about it? Because you gave it to another person, right? If you someone say, you know, instead of going there, I need somebody to go to the kaisel, we have to make, we're making Yom Tefillah for somebody who's sick, you would do that, no problem. But to give the ticket to somebody else who has to, who said they should go to the event and you not, then it really costs you, okay? And this happens because we are not thinking about the end game of where we're supposed to be going in the avodah that we have. Whether it's in our Benom L'Chaveroi, and there it's very prominent that we don't see the game. You know, I know the person that this happened to. There was somebody who was in a fight with his spouse. And there was somebody that was there during this fight. And since I'm a man, so I'm going to say this happened, it's irrelevant to what happened with. And this wife was bugging their husband about doing something which there was no reason that he should listen to her. And he gave in to his wife. So the person that was standing there said, why'd you give in to your wife? Why'd you let her win? You were right. And he said, I didn't let her win. I won. I gave in. Right? So in other words, when we have such a kind of a situation, what is called winning? It's called winning that you won this battle, or did you win the war? If what you're trying to do is advance your marriage, if you're going to give in to your spouse, you're probably going to advance your marriage further than if you are right in this particular battle. And this is, when we speak about Beit L'Chaver problems, this is a very serious issue. And even when it comes to Beit L'Chaver issues that we recognize them, that they are a mitzvah issue, and there we're a little bit more genuine and willing to forego for somebody else's ruchnias, but when we don't see it as a mitzvah, then it's, you know, you fight to the end. This is the problem. Mitzvah Hanoshim B'limada means we do the things that we do because we know that that's what we're supposed to do, but not because we're taking, where is this supposed to get us to? And that's the most important thing. A person has to realize that life is an ongoing episode, and at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the year, a person has to be able to say that I have moved forward in as many areas as he can. And people will end up doing, and you know, I use this as an example, this is not negea for women, so it's a good example to use for women. There's some people who they say, you know what, I want to learn more, so they take on more learning obligations. And they fulfill those more learning obligations. And then they asked me, so why haven't I grown? I said, because you've learned less. So you asked me, how could it be that you learned more and you learned less? I'll give you a story. There's this Avrech that I know, that I used to see him learning Ben Azdarim. He was learning Daf Yomi, and he was learning with a Schattenstein Gemara. So it's like it helps you out, gives you the pshat easier. So I asked him, why are you learning with a Schattenstein Gemara? So he says, it helps me learn. So I said to him, does it really? So he said, yes. So I asked him, if you have the Schattenstein Gemara, how long does it take you to learn your daf? So he says 50 minutes. And I said, if you don't have the Schattenstein Gemara, how long does it take you? He says, an hour and 5 minutes. So I said, so that Gemara is stealing from you 15 minutes of learning, right? Because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need you to turn more pages. He needs you to be sitting in front of the Gemara for longer, right? This is an example, and there are sometimes, I use examples, some people say, davening with a sitter, it takes me longer than davening without a sitter. So that's the reason to daven with a sitter or to daven without a sitter. It's not a game. We're not in a rush to finish davening earlier. This is, we have to understand where we're supposed to be going. And I'm just going to say this over to the mothers that are here. And this is a story which I believe is, I've said this over many times to men and to women. People find this hard to believe. I heard this from a great grandchild of the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim's daughter was supposed to be taking care of her child, and the child was behaving, so she decided she's going to daven. She's in the middle of davening Shemona Esrei, and the baby starts to cry. The Chafetz Chaim goes over to his daughter and says, go take care of the baby. Okay, that wasn't me that passed in that, that's the Chafetz Chaim. The mother's job to take care of her baby supersedes her obligation to daven Shemona Esrei. Okay, and that's now, it sounds like a fantastic idea, but I'll just say, in the subject of ladies davening and babies, I say that what ladies do is they know that it takes their baby 6 minutes to finish the bottle, and it takes them 5 minutes for Shemona Esrei, so they put the bottle in, and then they start the countdown, and they think they have an extra 45 seconds, and then the baby starts to gag in the middle, and who messed up their davening? The baby or the mother? Okay? So if a person would understand before he starts, the lady understands before she starts that her primary obligation is to take care of the baby, and if she has time to daven, she should daven, she wouldn't have been davening Shemona Esrei altogether. She would have been feeding the baby. Right? So this is an example of where we try to cut corners to win. But the problem is when we don't really know what we're supposed to be winning. If we would understand what is it that at the end of the day makes us a better person, we would realize that we're doing the wrong thing. Now, I said over a Chafetz Chaim story about his daughter and his grandchild. But I'll tell you the Chafetz Chaim himself, in the first Knesset in Kantowitz, so there was a very great debate over an issue, and there were some Gedolim that wanted to get their opinion to be won, and they made a filibuster. And the debate was going on for a long time, and then it became close to Shkia, and the Gabbai said, Mincha. And then it was supposed to break up. So the Chafetz Chaim got up and banged on the table, and he said, we're oisik b'tzorchei tzibur, no mincha today. Okay? And the meeting continued. Now, I'm not saying that these are the things that we're supposed to be doing, but this is called that we don't lose sight of what we're supposed to be doing. And the idea of what you're supposed to be doing gets lost in the day and gets lost in the month, and it actually changes. Sometimes, I get asked the following question. A lady says, I go to work and I have time to take off for eating. Should I be davening or should I be eating? So I ask her, can you do both? And she says, no. So I say, which is important? You have to eat, right? You have to eat. That's not, So you'll find some time to daven when you get home. Now, I'm not saying that davening is not important, but you have to understand at the time that you're here right now, every situation, what is it that the greater good demands of me? Sometimes the greater good demands of you to do the mitzvah that's in front of you, and sometimes the greater good demands that you forsake the mitzvah that's in front of you to do other things which have become a necessity at this time. And this is what I call mitzvah hanoshim imodo. People have checklists of things that they have to do. I have an uncle who came to Eretz Yisrael, and he was sitting on a bus, and there were two women, 75-year-old ladies that were on a tour, and they were talking, and he was listening to their conversation, and the one says to the other, did you do the Western Wall? Did you do Hebron? And he's talking about all of the things that they did. And he said to himself, I wonder if they did any of them, right? You can check them all off, but that doesn't mean that you were there. The problem is that people do all kinds of mitzvahs, and they even think that they're doing them with kavanah, They block out all the things that they're supposed to be doing, so they should be davening, and then they daven. And their davening was, their central kavanah, their davening was, I shouldn't be hearing anything else, I should just be davening, and they weren't davening with kavanah, right? So that davening doesn't have much value to it. Where they should have been davening or they shouldn't have been davening, I'm not going to get involved in that issue. But the question is, you have to know, what is it that the greater good demands of you? And this happens to be in, Rabbi Leib Steinman used to say, "V'lo re'isi vatrin," that did not end up winning. A person who has interpersonal relationships and he is mevater, always, he said, he was alive for much longer than me, and he said he never saw that the mevater lost out. Now, I just would like to say something about the mevater who lost out. I believe that Aaron Leib just said that about people who were really mevater. A person tells his friend, I was mevater to you yesterday, so you should be mevater to me today. So, was he mevater? No. Mevater means that you were mevater and forget it. We're starting over from scratch. If you're keeping score, you're in the middle of a game. There's nothing has happened. To be mevater means that's it. It's over, and you don't believe that you are going to get any credit for doing your vitur. A vitur has to be a true vitur, that you are saying that I consider myself secondary and the other person's needs more important. Now, on the subject of vitur, I would like to share an important thought. This is a parenthetical statement. It doesn't have to be said here and right now. I would just like to know if anybody over here would like to take a chance of defining the word vitur versus chesed. If anybody wants to answer that question, yes?
Chesed is like what you want to do because you want to do it, and the vitur is like might be you don't really want to do it, but you're doing it.
Okay, that's true too, but I don't believe that's the source of the issue. I'm going to give you a definition what I believe is in this source. Yeah. No, I gave my car right to somebody else. That's a vitur. That's a chesed.
You're giving up something that.
Okay, so I asked you a question: is that a vitur or a chesed? I think that's a chesed. I'm going to give a definition of the word vitur. Okay, we have, let's say we have an event, and there's 25 places in the event. So a person who's a good manager knows that there's a certain percentage of people that don't come. So they sell 30 tickets for the 25 places. And usually about 24 people show up, right? There's anybody who runs an event knows there's what we expect a fallout that's going to be. Now, this particular event, 26 people showed up. Now, when I say I'm going to let you go in my stead, this is a vitur. because you have a right and I have a right, and I'm being mevater on my right so that you can exercise your right. Right? That is a vitur. I'm stepping aside to let you have something which you can have. Otherwise, I'm just giving you something. A chesed is you're giving something to somebody, and whether they deserve it or they don't, whether it's yours or you could afford it, you can't afford it, but that's called a chesed. When you're being mevater, it means you're letting somebody else exercise something in a place where you could have usurped them because of your position, but they actually have a right to do that. Okay, understand the difference? What?
Depends. If she by mistake told two people she could have.
Yeah, then that would right. That's true. Right, then that would be a vitur. But generally, if I have a place in that run, I say you could have my place, and I'll take the bus. So then that's called you doing a chesed. Now it's very important when people do chesed or they do a vitur. In my opinion, it's very important a person should understand what they're doing. And when a person understands what they're doing, that helps them put it into perspective in their life. They understand, I'll just give you an example. These are important things. The Shemi Shmuel writes that Chazal say, Kol mi she'ein bo deya, asur l'rachem alav. Whoever doesn't have deya, which means a certain kind of intelligence, asur to have rachmanis on him. And then he writes, that's true, it's asur to have rachmanis on him, but it's a mitzvah to do chesed for the person. And he explains what's the difference between chesed and rachamim. And he explains very simply. You have a class, and you tell the class, whoever comes to class this whole month on time is going to get a prize. And one kid missed one day because something happened. And at the end of the month, he wants his prize, and he comes to the teacher, and he says to the teacher, have rachmanis. Right? Now, there's another kid who didn't show up altogether, and he says, I would also like to go. Have rachmanis. Does the second kid deserve rachmanis? No. Because what rachmanis means is there's a different lens that you could look at, and through that lens you could see that that person deserved it. He had some kind of an accent. Most of the time he tried to come. We'll call it, that's good enough, we'll call it like you were there all the time. That's called rachmanis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has rachmanis. That means that there's a way that he can judge that which we did through a certain kind of a prism and say that we deserved it. Mirz Hashem, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is coming in 7 weeks, and we're going to ask for rachmanis because we're going to show the good things that we did and say, look at those good things, and because of those good things, in those good things that we improved, we deserve to have a ksilach sima tova. If we didn't do anything better this year than last year, then they're asking for a handout. Then we're asking for chesed. We're asking for chesed, and Shemi Shmuel says the phrase to use, chesed is mitzad the noisein, and rachamim is mitzad the makabel. The person who is getting it, if there's a way that he can figure out how he deserves it, that's called rachmanis. He doesn't really deserve it, but there's a way that we can figure it out, that we can call it that he deserves it. That's called rachmanis. But if he just wants a freebie, so then that's chesed. And not always are we deserving of chesed. So we want at least that we should have some way that we can paint the picture of ourselves to show somehow or another how we deserve to get a good response from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is the subject which I believe is very important, where Yoda Shor Karneu v'Chamor Eves Ba'olo v'Ami Yisrael Yoda Oisi. Throughout our day, there are many. I spoke about things where we have, two things going and you have to pick one. Let's speak about You wake up in the morning and you say Moida Ani. Okay? Now, I can ask you at lunchtime, did you say Moida Ani? And you'll all say, yes, of course I said Moida Ani. How do you know you said Moida Ani? Because you say Moida Ani every day, right? But do you know that you said Moida Ani? I'm willing to say most people don't know. This has halachic value. And I'm going to share with you a story. This story happened to me about 25 years ago. I had to order a pair of tefillin, and I ordered from a very special cipher. It took him 2 years to write the tefillin. After 2 years, I came to get the tefillin, and he gives them to me. I send them to my magia to look at them, and he says there was something that was changed. And if it was changed one way, then it's kosher l'chatchila. If it was changed the other way, then it's possible. Now, I know the guy is probably not going to remember what he did. So I wasn't sure what to do. So I went to my Rosh Yeshiva and asked my Rosh Yeshiva, what should I do? So he said, very simple. Go back and ask the fellow, does he remember? If he remembers the incident and he remembers how he did it, and he did it the way that's kosher, then great tefillin, take him and run. But if he just says, like we spoke about Moida Ani, I know that it's also to do it the other way, and I wouldn't have done it the other way. You're not mechuyev for the price that you're paying to rely on what he thinks what he would have done. If he's willing to be made what he did, then take them. If he's not, leave them. Okay? So he wasn't willing to be made what he did. So he said he'll write me another pair. He wrote me another pair. He told me, come tomorrow morning and I'll give them to you. I came the next morning and he said, I'm not giving them to you and I'm not giving you any tefillin. So I asked him, why aren't you giving it to me? He said, I put them on my night table last night, and when I woke up this morning, they fell into my Negelwasser water. And they became puzzle. And I'm taking this as Siman Hashemaim, I'm not selling you tefillin. So I had to wait another year until I got those tefillin. But the point is, when you're saying that I did say Moida Ani, I would like at least tomorrow, if I would ask you at lunchtime if you said Moida Ani, that you should be able to tell me, yes, I said Moida Ani. You know, whatever it is that you daven every day, make it, at least part of it, a concerted effort that you know that you did it. Not just that it's checked off the list because you check this off every day. This is called doing things and actually having in mind. When your person does things that have actually in mind, then you will be better than the shor that just goes to the trough and eats, and you will be better than the chamor. You will be Am Yisrael Sheyada Oisi, because you're going to daven, and I just, from the things which I picked up sometimes, many times people speak to me, and I ask them in the middle of a conversation, when's the last time you spoke to Hashem? And if they tell me a week ago, I say, what happened to Shachris this morning? Right? People don't count that talking to Hashem. Now there are some people, and I know many people, that I can ask them, what did you daven different today, this morning, than you did last night? And they'll tell me, because there are people who really daven, and every tefillah has a special kavanah or a special tefillah for something. And it's important that we have some kind of an awareness of our avodas Hashem, because whether it's the first Beis Hamikdash, where they ended up doing big averis, or the second Beis Hamikdash was just sinas chinam and snide remarks, all of these things came about because of a lack of connection between that which they were doing and that which they understood was their ultimate goal. If we, in our daily lives, take into account, before we do something, at least once a day before you make a bracha, stop to think about what you're doing. Once a day before you make a bracha. That's not like, I'm not asking every single bracha that you make. Once a day you do that. And I say this over all the time. If a person will do one favor for somebody every day, from now until Tisha B'Av, I guarantee you that this Tisha B'Av will have a better effect than your Tisha B'Av did last year. Okay, that's
Eilition ve'oreo, כמו אישה בצירנו